Our guest today is one of Canada's most recognizable rock voices. As the frontman of the Sam Roberts Band, Sam Roberts has spent the past 2 decades crafting songs that blend rock, folk, and thoughtful storytelling. With multiple platinum records, Juno Awards, and hits that have become staples on Canadian radio, he's built a career defined by powerful songwriting and unforgettable live performances. Today, we're chatting with one of Canada's most endurable artists, Sam Roberts. All right, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're a little busy right now. You're prepping for a show. You're touring next month for the 20th anniversary of Chemical City. So 5 nights, 5 cities. How are you feeling?
I feel good. I really like being busy. I like having a lot of things on the go so that you don't have too much time to think, and you're just
Hmm.
spending all your time rolling from one sort of musical adventure into another one. I think this upcoming one is particularly important to all of us for a lot of reasons. But I think anytime something is important to you and you feel very sort of personally connected to it, then it adds a little bit of pressure to it as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're that we're ready for it.
20 years later, how does that feel?
I mean, we've been looking back at some of the photos and videos from back in Australia when we were making the record, and when you see, seeing ourselves, what we looked like, how we dressed, it's clear that a lot of time has gone by.
Yeah.
But you don't feel that necessarily. I don't feel the 20-year gap. So much has happened in that time. I still basically spent all of my life with my bandmates. So it's almost as if there was just a sort of continuous flow out of that record into a tour, into another record, and yeah, there's a thread that sort of joins all of these periods of your life together in such a way that you don't feel the weight of the time, decades in this case,
Yeah,
necessarily.
absolutely.
And it kind of it sneaks up on you, it catches up with you. You're just like, wow, yeah, 20 years. We were younger, we were full of different types of ambitions and ideas in those days. And where did that music come from?
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a mystery. Like if you tried to go and do it again, there's no doubt that it would come out differently.
Absolutely. You've never really written surface level songs. Even early on, there was a weight to them. When you sit down to write, what are you chasing usually?
I mean, I think that that's changed over time. It's not
Hmm.
like there's a topic that I'm after necessarily. I really go more about feeling and and sort of, I suppose, trusting the feeling that you get from the music that you're making while it's actually happening. And if you feel something for it, then you continue down that path. And the second you sort of lose connection with it on an emotional level, then I sort of turn back, I retrace my steps a little bit and go back to that place where I do feel something strong.
Hmm.
And I know that those are the instincts that governed us even making, Chemical City or any music really. But I feel like it's become even more ingrained in how I write songs now. And I
Yeah.
try really to stay out of my own way because my head, my life, my thoughts, they can act as sort of interference in your
Hmm.
ability to sort of see and capture music. And I think if anything that I've learned between then and now, it's yeah, just don't be the noise in your own head that stops you from hearing the music that you want to make.
I love that. That's really good advice. Um, you studied English literature before music took over your life. Do you think that academic background made you more analytical and intentional as a songwriter?
I love to think so. I always, I'm like, oh yeah, no, my degree definitely fed directly into how I approach writing lyrics and songwriting. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think a love of books definitely
Hmm.
has, and that's why I studied English lit in the first place. Was I just thought, well, I love reading, so why not just make that what I have to? Of course, it ended up being much more than that, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that word analytical. And I think that that's where I struggled a little bit in a way, was sort of the over analysis of what you were reading instead of, again, allowing yourself to just sort of feel your way through it. And
Yeah.
I kind of had to claw back a little bit on that part of it, on
Mm.
the analytical part of it, and again allow instinct and emotion to govern a little bit more readily when it came to writing songs, and that took a while. Because I think
Yeah.
when you're a young songwriter, you have a it's a very sort of topical approach in a lot of ways. You pick a
Yeah.
subject, and then you try to tackle it in some way, and it's less about that for me now, and really a lot more about being more willing than I was before to to share how I feel about
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of just bring down that wall a little bit. And I think when you're young, you cloak your emotions in characters, in almost like writing in the third person sometimes.
Right.
And I'm writing much more from the I perspective. Like, here's how I am. Here's how I'm walking through the world right now, and
Mm-hmm.
here's a song about it. So yeah, it's been pretty profound shift on that front from my perspective anyway.
Well, on that note of kind of being trying to be a little bit more open in your music, you've managed to keep your personal life relatively private, and that this is in an era that rewards oversharing. You've got social media and all that stuff. You've been married since 2004, and you're a father of three. How do you protect that part of your life and still write honestly?
I mean, on the one hand, it's don't talk about it. It's if it's not something that you want to share, certainly on social media and
Mm-hmm.
the infinite number of outlets and the infinitely deep appetite once you start to feed that beast
Yeah.
and become dependent on the process, and other people, you think other people are dependent on it, and then you feel this sort of urge to keep feeding it every day. I've never really felt the urge to talk about my life that way. And I think part of that is just sort of recognizing early on that that part of it all was not going to be what sustained me in a life making music.
Right.
That music
Ha-
had to be at the forefront of it all in terms of what I presented to the people around me. I think the answer to your question, though, has changed as I become less and less reluctant to reveal, again, in first person, how I feel about things. So in a sense, that's the level of revelation that I'm willing to share with people.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
it's in the songs. It's not going to necessarily be in an interview. Certainly not going to be in a post about what I had for breakfast this morning. But um, but yeah, I think there's sometimes a breaking down of that reluctance that
Mm-hmm.
happens over time. And for me, that came just sort of realizing that I couldn't write from any other place. Like I was actually getting blocked.
Yeah.
I was getting stuck in songs because it felt too inauthentic
Mm-hmm.
to not say how I was actually feeling or to wrap it up in some, sort of almost like a distraction, like look over here, but what I'm really trying to say is this over here.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of lost the ability or the desire perhaps to write like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, has fatherhood changed the way you see, themes in your own music now that you're hoping to be a little more open in your music or kind of bring down those walls?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, because fatherhood isn't a fixed sort of way of being, it changes all the time as you find out very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, it's you have this new precious, vulnerable life in your hands, and it's up to you to provide everything really. And so you sort of write from that perspective of awe and wonder at this gift, and then that quickly turns to fear in a way about what kind of world are we living in. And
Yeah.
if I listen back to the sort of records that came out a few years after my kids were born, it was very much about that,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, look, what are we doing to this place, this precious home that we have, floating out here in space, and what kind of world are we going to leave behind? And then you start to think, oh, well, they're going to be fighting on their own when I'm long gone. And
Hmm.
you kind of relinquish that fear in a sense. Not the responsibility, but perhaps a bit of the fear.
Right.
And then now they're teenagers. And the only lesson that I can really share with them is just try to be who you are. And so if I'm going to share that in any way, and perhaps in the most meaningful way to me, is to share it in, yeah, being allowing myself to be vulnerable in songs.
Yes, absolutely. Um, you kind of touched on, what kind of in your early music, even now still, what kind of a world are we kind of living in? It kind of reminds me of your song Detroit 67,
Mhm.
which isn't just a vibe, it's a piece of history. What draws you to moments of unrest like that?
I think the fact that they are so reliably consistent,
Hmm.
you know, these moments that seem like they're cataclysmic, that they're literally that, we're on the doorstep of Armageddon, and yet we persist in some way. So there's a hope that comes from it. There's a
Right.
hopefulness that comes from being able to battle our way through these times of unrest and change, and to find our way again. And then there's the other part of it, which is that we're going to just find our way right back into the same kind of space again. And that's part of the that's part of just being a human being,
Absolutely.
is yeah, living through these deep troughs and these very high highs, and then trying to find some sort of peace in the middle. And again, you kind of have to allow your songs to follow that flow in a way.
Right. Yeah. So when you're writing metaphor heavy, politically tinged songs, and in this world, a lot of people want simple slogans
Mhm.
almost. Do you ever worry you're going to be misunderstood or that you're saying too much?
I think I was preoccupied with that
Hmm.
more when I was younger. Like, again, politically tinged. You just can't help, speaking your mind when you're young, and you shouldn't. And you should challenge things. You should challenge ideas, even if you're wrong.
Right.
Even if you think that you've thought something through. I think it is the role of young people in this world to put things to the test. And certainly that's what rock and roll is built on. There's a defiance in it. It doesn't necessarily have to be informed all the time, but the act of defiance is important. And again, I really don't want to age myself in this interview necessarily, but it does change. And I find that that same act of defiance comes out in a different way now. And I look to writing about love as a form of, uh, speaking to the human condition.
Hmm.
Maybe the most important thing. And I think maybe you just have to live long enough and love long enough and love in all the different ways that it, winds its way in and out of your life in order to be able to start to think about singing that. Um, and now that's my obsession. Not to
Hmm.
sing about a political or, situation or social justice per se, but in singing about love, you kind of sing about everything that is humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. For a song like Bridge to Nowhere, for example, the title alone feels loaded. When you wrote the song, were you thinking about society or yourself?
I think again, when you're younger, you tend to write about yourself in either in society or in opposition to society.
Hmm.
The sort of the fighting to find your place in it all. And I think in those days, I, I mean, if I think about the song, there's a I sort of, I guess the beginning of like vulnerability in its infancy in a way, you know, less of the sort of swagger of earlier days and how I would have written songs 10 years prior to that, and more the admission that it's not all right all the time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think I was starting to write about myself there
Hmm.
more
And
honestly.
was there a moment in your career where success felt like that, like you were moving fast, but you weren't really sure where you were headed?
I mean, I don't know if we've known where we're headed the entire time. I still don't. You know, I'm still in a band with the same people that I've been playing with since I was a teenager, you know, and we're still, it still feels like we're finding our way all the time.
Yeah.
And you get thrown curveballs left and right, and you have to sort of navigate a landscape that's, I mean, to say that it's ever changing is like the all-time understatement.
Hmm.
It's just not the same 2 minutes in a row, and somehow you have to find a way to that becomes the norm, you know, the constant flux becomes what you have to adapt to. So to feel like you know where you're going is a gross overstatement of you know
Yeah. Yeah.
of your own abilities in a way. And I think we resigned ourselves to not knowing and to being okay with that. But the only way to do that was to just say, okay, well, here's the kind of band that we want to be. Not necessarily here's the music that we're going to make and we're going to stick to it, but here's the spirit of how we are going to relate to each other and how we're going to relate to making music and how we're going to relate to performing music. And I think we've sort of stuck to that as a way of, you know, finding our way through the weeds of uncertainty.
Right. And so, did you ever wake up mid tour and think, what exactly are we building?
Oh, I mean, that happened, you know, one bad show and you know you can find yourself in a world of self-doubt. There's
Hmm.
you know, or a record that you thought you knew where you were going, and somehow you just can't bring it there. And then even worse is when you deliver something that you're really not proud of, but that you think is of value, and then it's sort of just brushed aside.
Yeah.
um, that's happened more times than I care to admit, but
Right.
those are the difficult times. Those are the times where you have to really dig deep and say, you know, Chemical City was one of those records where it was the follow-up to a successful record, and because of that, it bore the weight of expectation, whether, you know, from the fans' perspective, but also from the commercial side of things with the record company and also to our own selves, you know, like, are
Hmm.
we going to be able to sustain the level of whatever it was that we finally managed to carve out for ourselves? And it wasn't that at the beginning. Uh, it it took a long time for that record to sink in, and I think we learned a lot about what time means in the scope of all of this.
Yeah.
That instant gratification is not something that you can um, allow to govern how you feel about things, that you have to give, especially with music, you have to give it the time that it's going to take to sink in and do what you feel it's capable of doing.
So, have you ever felt pressure to keep climbing? Growth for the sake of growth, kind of, in the industry.
I think we sort of dealt with that pressure very
Yeah.
early on by making that record.
Hmm.
And I think that that's why we're doing this tour, is because that record was a statement on a lot of fronts for us in terms of how we were going to relate to our own career and what we would tolerate in terms of external pressure and trying to shape us into something, you know, again, to just sort of recreate the same formula that had made our first record successful,
Yeah.
because I guarantee there was no formula to that either. That just was a lot of things coming together in a very yeah, fortunate way for us, but by no means by any kind of script.
Hmm.
Uh, things that were out of our the only thing that we controlled was the music that we made
Right.
and then how we represented ourselves. But the environment in which that record or into which that record was released was completely beyond our control.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think the first time that we made a willful decision was the in response to the pressure that that success had created, and that was, all right, well, now what do we do? Do we try to make We Were Born in a Flame 2? We're Still Born in a Flame, or do we go and make the kind of musical statement that we are feeling right now? And that's what
Right.
Chemical City was, and it was met accordingly with yeah, some blank stares. Some people loved it and some people hated it and some people didn't feel much at all. And but we learned how to deal with that, where to put that so that we didn't lose sight of ourselves in all of it.
Well, that is one of my favorite albums. So I was one of the people that loved it.
Okay, well, thank you.
Um, this kind of brings me to an American draft dodger in Thunder Bay. It's not about a metaphorical drift, it's more about someone making an actual concrete life altering
Mhm.
decision. Crossing a border to avoid war is how I understood it,
Yeah.
right? When you wrote that song, what drew you to that story?
I mean, I've always been fascinated with the idea that people fled the sort of the so-called greatest country on earth
Mm-hmm.
and the land of freedom and liberty to avoid going to a war that they didn't believe in and came and saw Canada as um, a safe haven for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, yeah, they came here and became part of the fabric of Canadian society. And I think when we were making this record, we were traveling the coast, traveling the country rather, back and forth and learning a lot about the things that make Canadians different in different places and things that bind us together. And that story to me is just such a big part of it. Just says so much about the
Mm-hmm.
country that we are. Um, and so I picked Thunder Bay as the sort of the place because to me it was staring at a map of Canada before I'd even traveled it at all. These were these mythical cities in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
Moose Jaw, Thunder Bay. They had this incredible and evocative names. So I was like, okay, well, when this draft dodger comes north of the border, that's where he's going. He's going straight. I don't know if any draft dodgers actually went to Thunder Bay, but in my mind, I was like, this is one of the true Canadian cities. So that's where he should
Mm-hmm.
go.
I love that. That's fascinating, though. But on a similar note, we're living in a moment where borders are charged. Young people are questioning their government, and war isn't really abstract. It's streaming into our phones in real time. The idea of choosing conscience over country feels kind of immediate. When you look at the current state of affairs, does this song land differently for you now than when you first wrote it?
Again, getting back to what your previous question about Detroit '67 and the reliable repetitiveness of history. So a
Right.
song can be seen to be sort of prescient in some way and say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're predicting something, but it's not that. You're really just putting your finger on a spinning record that keeps going around, and that moment is coming back, you know, um, because we history does repeat itself, and I suppose in all of it, it's like, well, what lesson do you learn from that? That's the thing that defines the one time from its prior incarnations or whatever. Is like, did we learn anything? And sometimes we don't feel like we've learned anything at all. Like we're literally just, this is a hamster wheel of experience from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
And I suppose our responsibility as individuals is to just take a step back from all that and say, okay, well, this has happened before.
Hmm.
Can we do this differently? Can we feel differently about it? Can we act differently in these circumstances? Um, and yeah, that's that will mark the time that we live in as being its own thing rather than
Right.
just a shadow of some other thing that we've already lived.
And so as a songwriter, do you think we're at a time that calls for louder anthems?
I don't think that ever goes away. I
Hmm.
remember in when we first started, putting records out that anybody heard, it was sort of right around 9/11 had just happened. The world was really on edge, the same way that it is now.
Right.
Obviously different, but the same feeling in a way.
Hmm.
And and yeah, I think as a younger songwriter at the time, I felt politically charged to write, so-called anthems. Anthems being something that people shout with their fists in the air, you know, and again, in protest of something, in defiance of something, or in unity. It's not just an act of defiance; it's an act of community and unity. And I felt very, very strongly about that. And I think that it's 100% incumbent on young and old songwriters. I don't mean to absolve myself from that, but
Right.
you know, especially young, to 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 paint the picture of the world that we're living in their words, in their eyes, with their music. We absolutely all need that. We all need them to do that. And I look to that to be inspired to say like, hey man, don't take your hat out of the ring just yet.
Hmm.
Don't just sail off into the sunset here. Like there's still things that need to be said via music, via literature and art and in all things.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think it is important, but it never goes away. The need for it never goes away.
I agree with you. And in the resistance, you were talking about kind of the idea of unity. It feels like people locking arms when the tension kind of finally boils over.
Mhm.
When you wrote that, were you imagining a political uprising, something more like was it something more internal, or is that just kind of a an
Well,
anthem? What was it a resistance against?
I mean, at that point, I'd sort of really sort of sunk into the idea that Chemical City was actually a place, and that
Mm,
there was a war, a mirroring of our own world happening in a sort of alter alternate universe, sort of, you know. Um, and I was really starting to get into that. Became the fuel for me for the songs. I was like, okay, well, if this is happening, if there's who are the characters populating this place? We've got these failed superhero or quasi superheroes like the bootleg saint. We've got the evil mayor, and then okay, well, who's in opposition to that? And it was really just about trying to create a whole world in a 10 song record. I'm not sure I succeeded in doing that. I think we left some of the songs off of it that are kind of fundamental to the storyline of it because the record was just getting too convoluted, musically speaking.
okay.
Um, but but I was trying to paint a picture that yeah, in response to oppression, you need people who are willing to take up arms and fight.
So you said you've kind of left off some songs again because it
Hmm.
got convoluted. Are you hoping to release them at any point?
We did actually release them. We re-released Chemical City about 5 years ago. It goes under the name Chemical City Redux, which has the
Okay.
the
Those are the
tracks.
songs then. Okay.
Those are the songs, yeah. So
Okay.
I think it brings the total from 10 up to 14 or something like that.
Okay. Oh,
But there
cool.
are, yeah, there are characters that are sort of like Major Minor, who was one of the soldiers. There's the cathedral, which is the big cataclysm at the end of the whole thing, and the cathedral comes crashing down, and in its place is sort of the end, the symbolic end of
Yeah.
you know the toxic place that was Chemical City, and the chance for renewal. Um, and then the last song is Step Inside, which is sort of like stepping into this now. The quiet has returned after the final apocalypse, and yeah, again, the chance at rebirth. Again, you just, you think of all these things and it makes perfect sense to you in the moment when you're writing it. You just hope that other people are going to kind of get the same. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But I don't know if we can play those songs. We're going to try.
Oh,
It's,
that'd be awesome.
we've never played them before live. And
Yeah.
so we got a few weeks to maybe we'll try to pull one or two of them out
Oh,
of
that'd
the
be lovely.
fire.
Yeah, that's awesome. You grew up in Montreal in a household shaped by immigrant parents, and they chose Canada as home. That's already a story about borders and identity and kind of choosing where you stand. Did growing up in that kind of environment with your parents, who had their own history of movement and transition, did it shape how you think about resistance and belonging?
I'm not sure about resistance, but certainly about belonging. When you grow up in a place that your parents have just arrived in,
Mhm.
they're discovering it at the same time that you are as a young child. By the time I was 5 years old, my parents had literally been living in Montreal for 5 years. And
Yeah,
so we went through that process of learning what it all how it all worked, how this new place that wasn't their home functioned. Uh, so yeah, and them trying to find their way. Now I recognize, it was one thing for me to wake up and go to kindergarten. For they're trying to find a new community, new friendships, new identity, new work, new um, and that obviously has a massive effect on how you grow up and how you see yourself. And again, defining yourself as a Canadian through that lens, not even knowing
yeah,
what it means at
yeah.
first to be Canadian necessarily,
That's
identifying
fascinating.
so closely where your parents have just come from and where all your families still are, that you haven't really had a chance to, yeah, to know the place that you're now living in. And I guess this what's strange for me is that now I've spent the last 25 years of my life literally just going back and through every single town that you can possibly think of in Canada, knowing Canada so much more intimately than I could ever have imagined when I was a kid in Montreal.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that's still it's ongoing. We keep going to new places, new towns, going back to places, getting to know places inside out, and playing music for them all. And that being the sort of bond that you share with people. It's a beautiful way to connect with people from everywhere. Um, and you tend to see people at their best
Hmm.
through music.
I love
So
that.
so yeah, it definitely shaped my life and continues to shape my life, where my parents are from, but also this idea of being very curious about being Canadian and
Mhm.
learning to love it through, yeah, just getting out there and getting your
Experiencing it.
getting your hands dirty and your feet wet with slushy snow and going and seeing it with your own eyes.
Absolutely. Did you grow up feeling? Sorry, did you grow up talking about politics? Were your parents?
For sure. I mean, especially when I was old enough to remember it, especially South
Mhm.
Africa, where my parents are from in the 1980s, at a was a very difficult and tumultuous time there, and there was a lot changing. It was sort of the peak of the apartheid regime, and I think, yeah, from my perspective, the disbelief that people could treat other human beings that way was just something that I really wrestled with that.
Mhm.
Um, and going there and seeing my family and witnessing it all firsthand really affected me as a young person, especially
Yeah.
coming from a place that's as tolerant and free and open as Canada. I'm not saying that we don't have our faults, we certainly do, but it was very dramatic to go there and to see that firsthand and to bring that back and go, okay, well, this is where your family's from. This is where you sort of identify with as a home. Um, Again, that had an enormous impact on me in terms of embracing yeah,
Yeah.
the spirit
Uh,
of Canada.
so then, when we have a song like "Where Have All the Good People Gone,"
Hmm.
um, it feels like a sigh. It's more like a weary question. Like it's not, I think, an anthem where it's like like angry. When you first wrote that song, were you reacting to something specific in society, or was it more personal?
I mean, it was pretty personal because I was on a Greyhound bus, and that makes you think a lot about people when you're in
Mm,
close quarters for a long distance bus ride.
yeah.
So, sometimes you can write these universal statements about humanity, but it's really coming from a very specific personal place. And then, of course, a song tends to take on a life and a mind of its own and to grow into different spaces,
Yeah.
which that song has. But yeah, it was really in response to just looking around and being a disgruntled 20-something-year-old trying to find their way in the world and lashing out at everybody else around them. And that song was sort of born out of that. But like I said, it's come to represent something very different to me.
Right. Right. What does it represent now?
I mean, now it's really about, I think the familiarity that ourselves, the band, the audience, that song, the sense of, again, it's such a communal experience when we sing it that it defies the lyrics in almost every way because it's such an uplifting moment now,
Yeah.
um, completely contradictory to like what the song is it's talking about. It's come to be the exact opposite. It's a moment of celebration.
That's awesome. That's amazing how songs or their meanings could change over time, even for the songwriter. Um, and there's a difference between cynicism and discernment. That song walks like a fine line there. Have you ever caught yourself slipping into cynicism, and how do you pull yourself back sometimes, if you do?
I mean, I don't think I'm naturally cynical, but it's not to say that I don't have that, the sensitivity or the, that I don't allow myself to just sort of throw my hands up at the inconvenience of life and humanity, and I definitely do that, but I don't think it's my natural state. So I tend to bounce back from that. But again, maybe that's because I've had this outlet my whole life where I can just
Right.
pour it into a song. And I've written cynical songs. But even when I was young, I tried for the song to finish somewhat um, optimistically, trying to see, and even if it wasn't in the lyrics, it was in the word, the music itself, that there was always a sense of optimism in there somewhere. And I just think that that's how I feel about
Right.
life. There's a
Um,
lot of tough, you know, maybe I'm saying that from a place of some privilege now, just having lived a good life, an interesting life as far as I feel it anyway. But um, yeah, this is a great thing we're all doing, being alive, and I kind of try to keep that front of mind every day.
I love that. So instead of "Where have all the good people gone," could you now say "They're still here"?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
I
what
mean,
will
look,
what will
we
it
have
take
our
from
good
you?
days and our bad days. There's no question that you turn the news on, you're like, okay, that's
Yeah.
question is still very valid.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but ultimately, you have to believe that we fight through, you
Mhm.
know, that we are, again, resilient, not just, physically resilient, but that we're resilient in our spirit as well, that we fight through the dark times and find a way. And that's how we keep going. And again, we wake up with some kind of hope in our hearts against all odds sometimes, but we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to end this interview with a series of rapid fire questions, if that's
Okay, my
okay.
not my specialty, but anyway, I'm more of a rambler, as you can tell.
I am too, trust me. You're like, but let me explain why. All right. A band tradition before walking on stage.
Oh, those have changed over time. I mean, first the one that's comes out closest to sticks to mind. We'd put on London Calling by the Clash and blast it, and
Oh,
then
I
we'd
love that.
we'd get on our jean jackets as if we were going into battle, and that's how we started every show for the longest time.
Oh, that's awesome. Which band member cracks jokes at the worst possible time?
Oh God, Eric, our keyboard player, absolutely no sense of comedic timing.
A guilty pleasure album you secretly love.
Ooh, I mean, is Rick Astley's debut album really a guilty pleasure? I think it's pretty legitimate, but yeah.
Best advice you ever got from another musician.
Bring more underwear than you think you need on tour.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah,
Something you've
practical, but good, keeps your head in the game.
definitely need to be reminded, I
Yeah.
feel. Yeah. Something you've had to unlearn.
I think I have learned and unlearned the practice of songwriting about 20 different times over the last, couple of decades for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't rely on a method and don't rely on something that worked for you before. Be willing to, uh, yeah, break new ground on that front. If you want to do something that's meaningful.
Tour bus movie night. What genre of movie are we watching?
Oh my God. What is the last one that we all watched together? First of all, we just had the Olympics on. We were on tour for 3 weeks. We had the Olympics on nonstop. I mean,
Nice.
it was like get off stage and get right back to watching the Olympics. But I think we've watched Spinal Tap as a band, which is kind of, it's like you're looking in a mirror basically. And I think that's a
Wow.
movie that we've watched. I don't know how many hundreds of times, but it just makes us feel like there are people out there who understand what it's like to live that strange life.
Love that. One thing you can't travel without, other than underwear.
Other than underwear, um, man, what do I travel with all the time? Oh, I think my mug, my coffee mug, gotta have
Mm,
it in the same thing every day. A creature of habit.
I'm like that too, honestly. I totally can relate. Something people assume about you that's totally wrong.
That I'm tall. They don't, because I look tall on stage.
Well, no one has to know. Uh, and the best city you've ever played live in.
Oh, that you know what? I used to have the same answer for that, and I'm not sh that's like it's a moving answer for me. There have
Yeah.
been cities that occupied the crown for a long time, but I'm gonna speak to like where our best shows have been recently.
Okay.
Um, Man, my favorite city to play in is I love playing in Spain, in Madrid. I don't know, they just get us over there. I don't know why. It's like
Aw.
the only place in Europe where they really get us. So I want to give them a special mention. But right now, our shows in Vancouver have been amazing.
Mm,
There's for just in terms of yeah, just the level of unbridled sort of energy out there. But I mean, that title has gone to St. John's, Newfoundland. It's gone to Edmonton. It's gone to it's a rotating target, and it really depends on like where was our last really really great show. So
right.
that's more of a challenge to cities out there to dethrone. Okay, right now dethrone Vancouver. That's the mission.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna make sure our Edmonton people are on their game. I
Yeah,
promise.
Edmonton's been right up there for many many times. So we're just looking for them to just say, all right, challenge accepted.
Awesome. Where to next? Where are we headed from
I'm
here?
going out. Actually, yeah, I have to go to Banff this weekend to do something out there, and then we come back and get ready for the Chemical City. traveling circus.
Love that. That's exciting. Sam, thank you so much. I know you have a very busy schedule, but thank you so much for making time for me. I
It's
really
my absolute
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thanks for such a great in-depth conversation. So we'll have to do
And
it again.
we will definitely have to do it again. I'd love that.
All right.
All right. Good luck with the tour.
Thank you. You take
All
care in the
right.
meantime. All right.
Thanks. You
Bye.
too.